And, hello everybody. My name's Sam Birgin with Direct Energy. I'm part of the technical sales team here. Like we were talking about, out of the Chicago office. So my primary focus is really the Illinois market, ComEd, MISO, Ameren, but I'm also really involved in demand response, renewables, for a lot of the Midwest here. Yeah, today, really kind of what I wanted to discuss and kind of two parts. One, just kind of do a brief market update, kind of take a look at where we are currently in the market and how it compares to historical look back. And then the second part, I want to talk a little bit about our all-in product, Fixed Energy Standard. It's a newer product that we've rolled out, and you can just kind of discuss some of what that entails, some of the differences. But starting out, this is really just kind of taking a look at how the historical NYMEX has settled monthly going back to January 2008. So this is where we are currently, where the graph ends. So July settled at about $3.61. And then, currently into August, it's, I believe the last settle was a little bit higher. And then, this graph will be updated as the month ends. But really kind of, what we're looking at here is, when we take a look at a recent look back, we're seeing that prices right now are at the highest point that they've been in the last 2+ years, 2 to 3 years. And so it's kind of different market selling conditions than we've seen, especially in 2020, where for the last couple of years, it's been, this is what your price is now compared to your last price. Oftentimes, the current price has been lower than the customer's last contracted price, and so it's been more of a sell on savings. But now, when we see prices, considerably higher than where they were in 2020, that's no longer the case. And I think something worth noting is that 2020 was more of an anomaly than the norm. For gas, as we can see here, and a lot of the power markets throughout PJM, we were hitting historical lows in 2020. So it's really kind of a different story than it was historically. And I think it's also important, a lot of customers, when they're looking at their current price and comparing to their last price, they're just taking a relatively short historical view on what's been going on. But when we look further back, current pricing really isn't, it's not hitting all-time highs. It's really not, not at a really high level. We're taking a look at some of the previous peaks, like 2018, 14, and especially 2008. And this graph were to go back, previously, we would have seen prices much higher than where we've seen in the last 10 years. So when customers are kind of taking a look at pricing now and they're seeing a higher renewal price, it's more of a risk mitigation play than just straight savings. Because yes, in a lot of cases, they'll see a higher price than their last contracted price, but there's a lot of room for this pricing to continue to escalate, where it's hitting, previous highs, and we can see that, we often say the trend is our friend. We see that price has been increasing. There are, market fundamentals that, could lead it to dramatically spike. Granted, in this market, we always hear the saying, or, we would say, no one has a crystal ball. We don't know where pricing is going to go. But there are some factors such as, when we look at the storage levels for natural gas currently, we're lower than the 5-year average. We're lower than the levels for the last year. So if we do see a really cold winter, it could cause prices to spike. It could get to these, $4 to $5 levels. could go higher. So it's when customers are kind of looking at what to do, it's not so much just wait for a lower price. It's really trying to mitigate your risk, and could prices jump significantly, because we do see a lot of times in the market when customers wait to chase the bottom or for new lows or pricing to come down. Sometimes we do see some market relief, but oftentimes prices just continue to increase. So kind of moving on to this graph, we took a look at before was the NYMEX historicals, how all the monthly settles have performed recently, and then back to 2008. But when we're looking for the future, typically each strip trades per calendar year. And here we're looking at 22, 23, 24, 25, and 26. So for each future strip, our customer will be looking at. And if we kind of take a look at how these future strips trade with this being where we are today, and how these strips have moved since January 1st, 2018. We see oftentimes the strips trade together. We see sometimes they separate a little bit, like here in the middle of 2019. Oftentimes they converge, they're very close, like in May of 2020. What we're seeing now is some greater backwardation, where the strips for the upcoming years are trading much higher than if you were to go further out. Like, for example, the 22 strips, so any customer that's looking for 22 term is about 80 cents higher than for 24, 25, and 23 is even substantially lower than 22. So really what that means is that typically the longer term a customer's going to go out currently, the further they look to contract, the lower their price is, because the further they go out, the more of these future strips we're blending in there. This graph over here, or this chart, really just kind of takes a look at these future strips graphically, or numerically. For example, for Q4 2021, if a customer was just to buy for the last quarter of 2021, it's within 99% of the lowest it's ever been. So in other words, an easier way to say that would be 99% of the time prices have been lower than where they are today for Q4 of 21. And then we kind of see that really we're up against new highs for all of these quarters. And then highlighted here in yellow is the actual full calendar future strips for 22, 23, 24, 25. This is where the wholesale price is coming in for these strips. And then we can see for 22, 91% of the time it's been lower than where it is today. But again, as we go further out, we're seeing some of that relief. 2025, for example, we're within the 30th percentile, so 29% of the times prices have been lower than where it is for 2025. So there is some value in looking at a longer term. And I just think it's something worth mentioning to customers. If they have a term that starts, December of 21, and they're only looking for a 12-month term, they're really just going to be buying this 22 strip and see considerably higher prices, where it might make sense to look at that longer term and blend in some of these lower prices. Here's just kind of an indicator. If a customer is looking for a September 2021 start, this is assuming the same volumes every month. Typically customers will have more usage in the winter, but just a straight average, same usage every month. For a 12-month term, the rate would be about $3.82 just for the gas, not including basis, the smaller transportation portion. $3.82, and then we see for 24 months goes down to $3.52, down to $3.31, and then so on. So between a 60-month term and a 12-month term, it's a substantial difference. So really, I guess the point of it is just where current market conditions are kind of indicating, it makes sense for customers to look for a longer term. So I guess I'll pause there, see if there's any questions on kind of the market update piece before we move on to the energy standard product piece. For the 48 and 60, so these strips for, this is assuming September 21 start for 24, 25, and 26. these strips are currently liquid where you can buy for them. I mean, this is where it is currently if they were to take a look at pricing. So for the future, we don't know where they're gonna move. We don't know for any of the strips, 22 or 25. The future is unknown. But this is looking at where the strips are today. These are current market conditions. That's why we know where it is like as of right now. So due to previous market conditions, a lot of times we don't see backwardation where the future strips are further or higher priced. Really though, I think that's natural where 3-year term is kind of the longest that someone's just willing to sign a contract. They don't know what's going to happen. But to that point, I think the conversation is still kind of, when you boil it down, the same in terms of if they're looking between a 12-month and a 3-year year, the 3-year is going to be the better option. It's going to be the lower price. As long as, really where we're seeing super elevated pricing is in that 22 strip. So if they can, purchase any of 23, they're going to bring down that price. If they're willing to go out to 24 in the lower strip, even better. But I think, if someone's saying pricing is really high, we typically do a 1-year. Yes, maybe a 5-year is not the right answer. But how about a 3-year? I guess it's more of a 3-year is better than a 1-year. This reason. And kind of as far as our product suite, I just also want to throw this out there to let you know it exists. For a lot of times larger customers, we don't have to hedge 100% of their volumes on any given day. Typically, if they're a smaller customer, that's usually what they want to go with, like one price and it's just fixed. But if you do have a larger customer, we can do hedges, like hedging winter only, since that's often where the most risk is. Only hedging, approximately 50% of their volumes, and if pricing comes down, hedging another 50%. We do that all the time with power. That's also an option. But I think to your point, I think the conversation would be more around the 3-year. If they can go out further, the price will come down even more. But it's just current market conditions, longer term, better price. Storage for gas is a huge indicator of what might happen in the future. I mean, again, we don't know for sure, but we usually look at where we are today for storage levels versus the 5-year average, and we're really, our storage of gas right now is really quite low. Not only that, but exports of natural gas, the demand for exports is really quite high. So we are exporting gas. That last kind of major component, in my opinion, is weather this winter. If it's mild, everything could be okay. If it is super cold and we already have low storage levels, export demand and exports are really high, it is it could turn out that we see some really dramatic, significant spikes, maybe creating new 10-year highs. Like I said, I'm never speculating on what'll happen because no one knows, but it's definitely possible. The utilities follow similar fundamentals. Like I mean, as far as market indicators, I don't watch the utility too closely. I mean, I watch them so that I know kind of where our customer rates are, but we see the trend for wholesale gas, follow. If we see a NYMEX prices spike, utility rates are going to go up as well. And for that fact, we see it, future power strips, future power prices correlate very closely with gas too. So if gas prices spike, it's safe to assume that power will probably follow and vice versa. Yeah, we keep an eye on, or I do, on utilities, but I don't use it as a major indicator. I think wholesale NYMEX prices are more of an indicator for what will happen with with utilities. And on the customer side, it's really for their business a budgeting play as well. Utility pricing might be lower last month, the month before, but then if they pull their February bill, might be considerably higher. Look at a few years back, looking like the polar vortex of 2014, a few months with cold snaps. When those prices spike, a 2-3 month spike could disrupt their entire year's budget. So, it's one thing to look at last month's price, the month before, but what we're looking at here for customers is budget certainty, and so that they know what they'll be paying for the future. They're not subject to the market swings when they hedge. But yeah, I mean, every customer is different. What's important to them, varies how they look at it. Mexico as well. The demand for our gas in Mexico, we're exporting a lot more year over year as well. Locationally, it's a little easier to get it there, but we're seeing that grow quite a bit. And yeah, to your point, it's like you said, it's all supply and demand. And as the demand's increasing for this, and we're shipping more out. I mean, we still have our demand at home, but then also when we're looking at other countries, it's just a kind of an indicator of pointing up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and over the years, I mean, we go through these cycles. I mean, it's if you're showing them just the lower price compared to their last price, that's one thing. It's straight savings. It's different, market conditions, but I think the risk management piece of it, it's maybe some customers don't look at it as closely, but it's still extremely important part, because once prices do spike, then and they haven't hedged anything, that's what they're paying, and you can't go back at that point.
Yep.
Yeah, just kind of moving on. Just wanted to let everybody on the call know that this product exists. Talk a little bit about Power, our fixed energy standard and fixed energy classic product. So really our traditional product and still is, nothing's changed. This product is fixed energy classic. So it's really our all-in product with less true up or adjustments. It's getting as close to truly fixed, I guess you can say, as possible. In my opinion, and I think the opinion of a lot of people in the industry, there's no such thing as a truly fixed all-in price. Every supplier has change of law language in there. If something fundamentally changes with how with how these rates are calculated on the regulatory side, there's a good chance there's going to be adjustments to reflect that change. So what we recently came up with was our fixed energy standard product, and really it's a fixed all-in price, but with bilateral true-ups, most prominent to capacity. When we look at the breakout of like all the components that make up all-in power rate, it's primarily energy, which is about 15%. Depending on the usage, these percentages will change slightly, but 50-55% energy. And then capacity is the next biggest component, the transmission, and then ancillaries, losses. There's some other components like ARR credits and things like that, but those are the primary ones. With our fixed energy standard product, when we're pricing up a customer now, there's certain knowns for the future. For example, we only know what capacity is right now for the 22-23 planning year. Past that, we don't know what that is yet for most of PJM. Same thing with individual customer tags that dictate how much they pay for capacity. A lot of these things are unknown. So all suppliers, when you're pricing in an all-in price, you have to make some assumptions for that. With the fixed energy standard product, they can lock in, a 1, 2, 3 year price all in. And once those knowns or unknowns become known, whether it's a year, 2 years, once, ComEd and PJM, publish their actual rates, those are adjusted on the bill. So it's bilateral, where if those rates go down, the customer sees a credit. If it goes up, they see a charge. And some of the benefits that we bullet point here for the fixed energy standard product is when you're comparing between a standard and a classic, the two products, the fixed energy standard is almost always going to have the lower price, because with fixed energy classic or any all-in locked product, because a lot of those future components are unknown and some assumptions have to be made, there has to be some kind of risk and uncertainty premium built in there for those unknowns. Since we're truing it up for the customer with the standard product, there are no risk or uncertainty premiums on that capacity, and as a result, it'll result in a lower price for the customer. Still gives them an all-in rate. And then the last bullet point ensures they never overpay for capacity. Because again, when you're locking an all-in rate and you're making assumptions for the unknowns, if those go down, the customer could end up overpaying by locking that all-in rate. With standard, it would just be trued up what they actually owe, and get as close to their capacity obligation as possible. Of course, when presenting it to a customer, it's important they know that they'll see a true up based on the information when it becomes published in the future. But if someone's strictly looking for a lower price, they want all-in price for budgeting, this is a good option for those customers. Not for everybody, but for many. And then the last slide that I kind of want to touch on when I say the unknowns, we kind of talked about capacity. So we're going to have a conversation offline. I'm happy to talk about how capacity is calculated in more detail, but there's two primary components to that, how that's calculated. One is the capacity price, the auction rate. That's the same for all customers, in PJM behind that utility. Like we're using ComEd as an example here. If you have a customer in PECO or buying PP&L or BG&E, all of them, they'll have different capacity rates. This trend will be the same, and it's calculated essentially the same way. But we can kind of take a look at how these capacity prices have traded over the last few years. They're always, for 1 year period, they go into effect June 1st, 2017, or June 1st to May 31st, so June 1st, 2017 to May 31st, 2018. Right now, we're in this $198.43 per megawatt day for June 1st, 21, up until May 31st, 22. And then this new price will go into effect June 1st to 22. We don't know what the prices are starting June 1st to 23 and beyond. So kind of what we're looking at here is any customer that locked an all-in rate prior to this last June 1st, when this new number was published, the assumptions that the suppliers used for that rate are probably higher than where it actually settled. With the Base Energy Standard product, on their bills, when we get into June 1st, 22 and beyond, they'll see a credit reflecting this lower rate. Like I mentioned, beyond June 1st, 23, we don't know what that rate is. The next auction for 23-24 planning year will be held in December of this year. And so if prices settle low again, and a customer is locking for a term that goes into that June 1st, 23, they might be locking at a higher capacity rate now. But with the standard product, they will see the benefit of that credit. So I just kind of want to make everyone aware that this product exists. The standard is essentially it's an all-in price with bilateral true-ups. Yeah, and we also offer just straight capacity transmission pass-through as well, where instead of an all-in rate, they're essentially signing zeros for capacity transmission, and every month, whatever it is, that's the price they pay. I feel like in this market for power, energy is really, when you hedge energy for the future, that's the component that you can really control. The other, capacity transmission, ancillaries, they're dictated by the regulatory bodies, PJM, or if you're in New York, New York ISO or NEPOOL, and in New England, those are subject to those tariff-based costs are subject to those regulatory changes. So a customer can hedge those, but again, it will be a change in law if that changes. And if it does go down, which we could see it did recently for capacity throughout all PJM, the customer gets the benefit on a standard product or passing it through. Every supplier handles it different, but these rates, since they're tariff-based rates, if they do go up, it is like by definition a change in law. I think also it probably depends on how much they go up. I mean, if it's negligible, it's like, okay, but I guess if it's substantial, I think in a lot of cases, or I do know in a lot of cases, you will see the rate being passed through. And really, essentially, when when a supplier locks in that capacity portion for a customer, really, that dollar obligation is still owed the utility. So the supplier is just taking what they anticipate that dollar obligation to be, unitizing it, and all they want, and I can't speak for, you know, everybody or us, but typically, suppliers just want to get as close to possible to paying the PJM or the regulatory body what the customer owns. Just so, you know, it's, they're accurately, you know, paying the, regulatory body that charge, and the customer is accurately reimbursing them through the all-in rate. You know, it's not a, you know, there's not like, I can't speak for other suppliers again, but I don't think suppliers are trying to make money off this component, nothing like that. It's really just trying to get an accurate apples to apples dollar amount. And if this does go up, the supplier has to pay PJM in a lot of cases that obligation. And so if it's passed to the customer, it's just trying to make them whole. So again, every supplier is different. On the back end, it gets a whole thing of hedging capacity, how every supplier handles that. But I have seen it quite common that if this price does go up, especially if it's dramatic, the rate portion is passed through as just an adjustment. Honestly, I don't think I've seen, you know, a ton of movement based on the policy. I feel like historically, kind of what I've seen is when something like substantial is announced, we see some market movement, and then things kind of settle. And then if something new has been implemented, then we also see some movement. I mean, there was a lot of speculation that, you know, Biden in a Democratic, you know, party coming into power is going to be very, you know, anti-fracking, anti-natural gas. And so, you know, if they cut down substantially on fracking, that would drive prices higher. We have seen prices for gas go higher. In my opinion, I don't think it's been made, you know, primarily a policy factor that's been driving it up. I think there's, you know, kind of like what we talked about before. I think it's really more the supply, the demand portion of it, because we haven't seen anything substantial in terms of cutting out fracking really. If we're looking at like on the renewable side, like, you know, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with like RECs or renewable energy certificates. It's kind of like an add-on for customers that want to green up their power. We have seen those prices really jump dramatically, and I think that might be more, that's also a supply and demand. I think that's just from the corporate world is really driving renewables a lot more, and you know, more aggressive sustainability goals, but also at the same time, more on the policy side there. I think the Biden administration is very renewable friendly. So that's been driving up REC prices. But as of like just straight the energy prices, I haven't seen anything that they've announced that has really moved the needle substantially. Before he became president, there was speculation that it would, or that it could, I guess. And I don't really think it's come to fruition, to be honest. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Great questions.
Thank you.
Conversation. Thank you.